So Alex, you know less about the group. This is a weekly graduate student training session supported by we have two NIH centers that have trainees and then associated graduate students in sociology, economics, population health sciences, consumer sciences. What am I missing? Psychology sometimes. I don't know if anyone is in the room. Is there a part I haven't mentioned yet of anyone in the room?
Applied economics.
Yeah, so we also, Alex, have two economics departments on campus and two sociology departments on campus. So yes, lots of disciplinary backgrounds, but the point is to have a professional development seminar. Sometimes it's about methods. I think a couple weeks ago it was about giving it from a perspective of a dance instructor. What was it?
Yes, a drama
instructor.
Action actress. Drama therapist.
Drama therapist.
Yeah.
So today Sebastian, I'll let you introduce Alex. I'm going to introduce you first.
Okay, cool.
Because I only have notes for Sebastian. So Sebastian, as many of you saw yesterday and maybe also on Monday, has been going all around the campus providing talks on health insurance related papers. And he's here for the whole week, and this is his third of 3 formal presentations. This one is for our graduate student training seminar, and the title is the hidden curriculum. He's brought his swag here. Alex, do you have your water bottle on?
Not with me. Sebastian even told me to bring it. It's in the other room, so it's here.
So they do a regular podcast. I don't know if you want to fill in the details of what regular means.
Yeah.
There are many. Already many shows, many more in the queue, and we're going to start by Sebastian's going to introduce Alex, and then we're going to start with some background of like how this got started, how the podcast idea got started, and then we'll move into some of the like big concepts and issues that have come up over the time you've been doing the podcast. So I have some answers from our students, and I'll call on them, or I'll read them if they forgot their answers about what their guesses are on what the top topics have been, and also some things that they would love you to cover in future episodes. I have a short list of those things in mind. So let's have Sebastian do a short introduction of Alex, and then go into the how did we get here?
Yeah, sounds great. So Alex Holmesworth is an associate professor at the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University. He completed his PhD in Arizona, and he also has a degree from Miami University in Ohio. Alex is a health economist who examines how regulations affects public health with interest. He's an MBR fellow. He's been cited in a bunch of media places. He does really cool work in environment, health, really also about methods. He has a really cool paper explaining what this particular method is. And one thing that I would have to say about Alex, and it's actually really nice in the conversation, is that I think he's a person that is very pro helping translate a lot of these things that are sometimes complicated when it comes to professional stuff or method stuff. And I think he's had this like inherent interest, because as him, we both did not know a lot, and we've been learning as we go. And we think that the more we should, the better that is for the profession. And he's also the co-host of the podcast. So thanks, Alex, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian and Jason. That's really generous for you to spend our time, and thanks for that warm introduction.
Do you want to start us off, Alex, about what comes to mind when you think about how this started and why you wanted to do a co-podcast with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I view those as two sort of different things. So number one, I wanted to do anything with Sebastian. He does lots of awesome stuff. So he was writing a lot of newsletters and things for the ASHECon, the American Society of Health Economists, in the newsletter. And I knew him on and off, like, I think through like conferences and things. So I had sent Sebastian an email when he was, I don't know if you were like the co-editor, but you had like some role at the ASHECon newsletter. And I was like, hey, I have an idea for like an article. And you were like, how about instead of an article, we do a podcast where we do this. So it was really Sebastian's good idea that this started. And, COVID mostly stunk. But one of the nice things about COVID is it gave some opportunity to create sort of different events like this. So we sort of decided, hey, why don't we just do a podcast where we try to talk about stuff that we didn't learn, which seems in grad school, but seems to be just as important for our success as all the stuff we did learn. Because I think like that's something we always talk about, like over a beer or coffee or whatever at a conference, like, man, I can't believe like how hard it is to publish, or, these like sort of secret rules of doing and receiving referee reports and things. So we just sort of wanted to illuminate that for the profession.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, no, that's right. And Alex is being humble. So I was managing this kind of like small newsletter for a particular professional organization, and Alex came in with a series of articles idea. So it wasn't like, hey, I want to write this particular article. He was like, I want to write this series of articles about X, Y, and Z. And so I said, why don't you write one thing? And then I put him to the side on email. I was like, I also have this idea of a podcast, and maybe this will work well. And I think that's how kind of that got started. I would say that one of the things that we decided to do kind of like early on about this project, and I think it was very important, is to kind of like just do it, because there's like a million decisions that you can take about, you know, the name and the structure and all kind of the stuff like that. And from all the stuff that I read about starting things like this, a lot of the advice that they give you, just do it, and it will naturally evolve and grow. And I think that was like smart in that sense. And we kind of like recorded the first episode without having a clear sense of like what was going to be about. We were just like him and I talking about a topic. I think we recorded a second one that we never published. There'll be the unedited, just for premium members, I guess, because it was just like not great. And then the third one we decided to, I think third or fourth one, we decided to invite someone else to come in so we can ask them questions. And that, like, we really enjoyed that. They're like, oh, we should invite this other person and so on. So it did naturally grow. And if you listen to, I would say the first few episodes, this is just Alex and me talking about something. And now we have like a structure with a script. And I think the flow is much better and it's much easier for our guests. And that's been really nice. Alex, I don't know if you have anything to add about that process.
Yeah, and I'm like happy to talk more about this stuff if people have any interest in it. But basically, Sebastian's like super organized. So I have like open on my screen right now a like structure script that we use now. And I think that makes like life a lot easier. And I think it makes it like, I hope it makes it easier to like distill the actual point. So like, okay, we're going to have this person on to talk about this thing. And since we have these segments, it's like very clear, like, well, we only have 10 minutes to talk about like this main subject line. And before it was like a lot of rambling. And now I think like the organization saves people and makes it clearer, like what points, and we have to think ahead of time, like what do we want to talk about with this person, et cetera. So
yeah.
And you probably have each thought a little bit about this question of what comes to mind looking back of the big moments or the big points that you've have come up in the podcast that you think every graduate student should know. What comes to mind when you think about that question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if was that indication for me to go.
Yeah,
happy to go. Okay. All right. I honestly, the same kind of thing keeps getting repeated by lots of different people. And there's two of them for me. And one of them is like, regardless of the context, just like asking people when you don't know what's going on. And like, so like whether it's for a grant application, being like to a person that got the grant, like, hey, can I see your successful grant application? Or whether it's like you're writing a referee report and you ask like an advisor or an older student or just someone that you trust, like, hey, can you like blind the referee report that you wrote for a journal and like share it with me? And just like the same version of this advice being given by different people in different contexts, I found sort of refreshing, because in my mind, like smart people just knew all this stuff or they were like good at it. And it's been kind of humbling to see like, oh, this person that I view as like a really important big shot in the field also didn't know what they were doing when they started off. Like they're just a human that had to ask people for help. So I found that quite nice. And then the second thing is a lot of people are not time management gurus. In fact, almost nobody is. And that makes me really happy too. When I hear about people's workflow and they're like, oh, it's kind of a disaster sometimes. That makes me feel a little bit better, just as like being a human that's trying to like organize a to-do list and other things.
So how should students, let me interrupt for just a second. How should students, either of you, but maybe Alex first on that point, like figure out what should trigger them to say, oh, I don't know this, I should ask. You're not quite saying like always ask every time, all the time. You're saying that, in hindsight, a lot of people wish they would have asked and they figure out like, oh, that asking was really a great idea. But how do you think about, what's your policy about that you should, if you're talking to graduate students, how to know when to ask? What comes to mind?
That's a really good question. I think it's like tough too for like even like homework assignments or like working with an RA. Like there's like this weird combination where you're like, I want the person to like work really hard and figure it out on their own, but also I don't want them to waste their time. And like, how do you tell the difference between those two things beforehand? So I think just like actually giving it a shot and trying to like spend some of your own mental energy and time thinking about it and Googling it. And then like whenever you do ask for help, like at least indicating like, hey, you're not my first stop. I did think about this hard. Here's sort of what I think. I'm not trying to waste your time, but could you maybe help me here? I know that's not exactly a rule or a policy like you were asking about, but I do find that that seems to be a successful strategy. I don't know what you think, Sebastian. Maybe that's not right.
Yeah, no, I something similar. So I think so let me answer. This is a version of the answer to the first question too. So one of the things I learned, people told me about the profession in most of the, across fields is that networks matter, right? Like networking and knowing people, whatever. And it was always unclear to me what was the mechanism, because I was like, what do you mean by this? Like the networks matter? Like what is the actual mechanism? And I think what I learned through the podcast and this kind of goes in hands with Alex's point is that what networks, one thing that networks allow you to do is to have a number of perspectives and takes for different people for a particular problem. That's number one. But two, there's like depth and quality of the networks in the sense that you have your horizontal networks, your peers, your friends, you have like younger students maybe, and you have people who are above you academically, like, postdocs, junior professors, seniors, and so on. And so to go back to this original question about like, how do you know what to ask about what? To me, I think the strategy is somewhat along the lines of always try something for yourself first, right? And if there's something that you need to take a perspective, you start with your close network circle, which is like your peers, like, hey, I'm having this difficult issue about X, Y, and Z. With your perspective, and do you think this is something that I should go and talk to someone else or like try more myself? And then you kind of like slowly go up the circles. And so maybe there's a point in which one of your friends says like, oh no, I would never ask that to a person or whatever, but I would only ask them if I figure this out, and so on. Or maybe they say like, yeah, it's a question. Maybe you should ask your advisor about this. And maybe your advisor is going to say, actually, you should probably ask other people about this too. And so on. So I think there is no right answer, but other than the more you build levels of how you feel comfortable across people and discussing some of this, the better you can get a sense of when to ask appropriately and to which level. And that's my sense of that answer.
Is there follow-up questions about that particular one before we move on to other like big things about this point? Anyone in the room or anyone on Zoom, if you want to raise your hand? If not, I mean, we can come back to it too, but I think there's a bunch of stuff that we can talk about. So Alex, did you have a second one? I want to come back to workflow. Is workflow a second one, or is this something to come back to?
I guess I just viewed it as like a second sort of interesting thing that I learned along the way, but I'm happy to talk about it now, like different people's workflows. This has been, I think, like our favorite bit or segment. I don't know what word we segment maybe that we have. So
please go. What are the big takeaways that you start out with on workflow when you're talking to a graduate student or junior faculty or a colleague?
So I think like really broadly trying to condense all of the different people we've had on in the published and yet to be aired episodes. There are like two kinds of people. And of course, like there's people that are like, not everyone is perfectly in these buckets. There's people that use their calendar that are like crazy busy, that schedule appointments with themselves that are like for 15 minutes or for an hour and 15 minutes, like 3 Tuesdays from now, I'm going to like do this referee report. And then there's other people that like don't schedule anything at all for 3 days in a row because they like need all of that time and mental space to do stuff. And I found that to be really, I don't know if like revealing is even the right word, but like I found that to be really interesting how like it's pretty easy for me to be like, oh, you're like the maker or you're the manager. And I'm using words there from some guy wrote a blog post a while ago whose name is escaping me. I'll find it and put it in the chat here in a second. It seems like this is a correct split, at least of people we've had on the calendar so far. And they're both successful, all the types of people. I am definitely in one camp. I think Sebastian's probably in one camp more than the other. I'm amazed by people that can schedule an appointment with themselves and keep it and do the work for 45 minutes. It's like a magic trick or something. But I don't know. Is that even like the appropriate answer to the question, or did you want to get into more detail about something?
I don't know. I think that's what I was thinking. I think so. One thing, workflow is the second thing that I also had in my head. So I thought going into the podcast that as we asked this question to people, that we were going to find a pattern or something, that threads the line across those things. And I was like widely wrong about that. Like we have a range of people, and they're all like, whatever more version of successful you want to use. But like the ranges of workflow has been insane. Like we have this one person, and I can put his name because you can listen to the podcast. His name is Ivan Rudik. The way he works is like the chillest, coolest way, like 1 or 2 papers at most in a given time period, only really focuses on that, says no to a lot of other stuff and so on. And he has, good set of pubs, he's doing very well for himself and so on. And we have another set of person that like schedules every single minute, like it's involved in this and that and whatever. And so I think, and there's also like people who work at night, people who work during the day, people who work over the weekends, people who have kids and don'ts. So like there was no pattern. I think that was the conclusion, that you can be successful in a lot of these professions without necessarily having a pattern. Donna Ginter, we had a different episode, said something that I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That when we asked her about her workflow, she said, one question that I asked is, how long have you had this workflow? Because I really like thinking about steady state of like, once you find a system that you kept with it. And she said that no, that's not the case, that she changes as her life is changing about how she handles her time and the way and how she prioritizes what needs to get done and so on. And so that was really revealing in the sense that I sometimes, or earlier on before, I thought of workflow as you trying to find a system that works for you and then you keep it. Whereas she's like, no, that's much more dynamic. You can keep it until it works, until it doesn't work for you. And then you're gonna have to revamp and change it. And it's obvious now, like that I say it out loud, but I don't think it was practically obvious until you start talking to a lot of these people. And it's actually hard to me to translate that into advice for like grad students, right? Because it's like, okay, so you're telling me that there is no perfect path. And so I think you have to kind of see what works for you and what doesn't work for you, but make sure that you're also not, giving yourself too much wiggle room in things. So like, it's kind of about being accountable with yourself and what you can, but that's such a abstract and non-precise answer that it's not my favorite answer, but I think that that's something that I slightly converge to as I hear how people work.
So similarly, Alex, do you give any advice to graduate students about like workflow, except to say there's many types?
I mean, not really, honestly, because I think we're all trying to figure it out, and I don't want to pretend like I know how to do it. I've like feel like it's like survivorship bias a lot of the time. We're all kind of lucky in some way where we get like some pubs and things across the line, and I don't want to like misattribute why that is. That being said, like there are some things where I think for like in my particular program, I'm like by year whatever, you have to have a paper. So like I will talk with the students who I'm like advising, and I'll say, you need to make sure you're prioritizing the things that actually matter versus some of the things that don't matter, even though it might seem like they're all equivalently important. And I do purchase the book Deep Work by Cal Newport and give it to a couple of the students that I'm advising. So I guess in some sense, that's like a recommend, like I'm trying to push them towards like a maker schedule, but not really. Like I think people work differently. And as long as the students are doing stuff and seeming on track,
yeah,
I think let them do their thing.
I think experimentation is really important, especially at the early stage, and trying different ways and things of how things work or not. And so like, for example, for a while, this thing called like Pomodoro technique, just like you put 25 minutes and things work for me, but like now it doesn't. And so like, but now I'm trying different stuff. So like, I think experimentation is good if you allow yourself time to experiment, as opposed to outwardly reject other people's takes on what they're doing. So, I mean, that can help.
Yeah. And
Sorry, go ahead, Alex. Okay, go.
I was just say Ivan talked about that a bit too, and that's what Ivan's one of my good friends. But when he was on the podcast, he was talking about like, yeah, I've done a lot of stuff that doesn't work that other people said was great, and I liked that he was honest about that. And sort of what Sebastian was talking about earlier, like where Donna Ginther was saying like, hell, it's changed across time, like how I do stuff. Like it's definitely true. Like when I was in grad school, I had a lot of quote unquote free time. I was like anxious a lot of that time, but like I could just like devote many hours to a problem. And now I'm like, I have so many emails. Like, so like my problems are like kind of different now than they were before. Like, even if I'm like trying to like have the same output at the end of the day. So like how you approach managing those sort of changes across time.
Related to this Genther point, who's a UW?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Bring it back.
Yeah.
W.
Coming back to that point about the dynamics, do either of you have advice about knowing when something's not working? Like you were saying, Pomodoro, how did you know that it wasn't working, Sebastian?
That's a good question. I would say first things that come to mind is about compliance. So like if the point, let's use this Pomodoro technique. If the point is like you put on 25 minutes and you're only supposed to work on one task, and then you're seeing yourself like, oh, what about this thing? And what about that thing? And like, you don't do the whole point thing, then you want to keep trying it, but like, maybe that's not the thing that is working for you. And maybe you need to be just a little more extreme. Like, I'm going to unplug the internet, right? And just do it. And then maybe that works for you. And so I think it's like understanding a little bit about how you're reacting to that. And obviously if, sometimes you would say, okay, I'm going to try to work like 8 hours a week or whatever, or 8 hours a day, but maybe that's too much and you're burning out. So that's not working for you. So I think noticing about compliance, noticing about maybe your mental health, and I think that, and being aware and mindful, maybe that could be helpful about ruling things out.
Is there anyone here that has had advice, either good or bad advice about workflow, or have made any of these transitions that you'd like to talk about or ask questions for? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was wondering, so.
And if you could just speak up, the mic's right there, but so.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you.
I was just wondering, like, as a grad student, my workflow is, I'm very productive and I have a lot of things that are working out in my favor. And when something doesn't work out, I feel extremely demotivated and tend to procrastinate whenever even simple tasks
Yeah.
I know I can do very easily. So I was wondering if you guys have any advice about how to deal with demotivation, because whenever that happens, the imposter syndrome kicks in, and it's also bad for my mental health. So I was just wondering if you had any tips regarding that.
Yeah, Alex, you want to take that one first while I think about it?
I feel bad with this response, but like, you're a human, like, congrats. Like, I don't know. I feel the same way when bad stuff happens. And I think like, I ended up buying these books by Stephen Pressfield when I was like a brand new assistant professor. They're like written for artists, because I was like so stressed out about like, because like when you have fewer things, like the relative importance and how much it stinks to like have one of them get rejected from a journal, it like stings a lot more, right? And it's just true. Like so until you're like further along in your career, like each rejection I think does sting more than like later on. And so his books are like written for artists who are like struggling with a similar sort of thing. And they're like kind of weirdo, like books that might not speak to you. But for me, it was like really useful because he was just like, keep working every day. And it was like advice for like a struggling artist. And it's like, if you want to be like have inspiration strike, like you better have a pen in your hand when it strikes, is like sort of his motto. I know it doesn't work for everybody, but for me, that worked for me. Like, lots of people in different fields have the same problem. So I'm going to keep plugging away. I know that's not actually going to help with demotivation, but that's where I was.
Yeah, no, I think I have similar takes. So I get two takes. I think one, and I think Alex and I are very open about this. If it's something that it's very acute, let's say, don't think that any advice or self-help book or whatever this thing is going to help. Like maybe you actually need to go through therapy and work through those issues, right? Like mental health is important, and we should not stigmatize this. And like I've gone through therapy to deal with specific issues, and it's been very helpful. So like I think if there's one clinical aspect of this that like no matter what we say, it's going to solve that problem. But if it's not maybe as acute as you think it is, to me, the biggest or a big helper against this idea of motivation is habits. There's a quote by this book that I really like, which is you don't rise to the level of your goals, which are based on motivations and things, you fall to the level of your systems. And so what that means, or what it's saying is like, oh, I have this goal of, writing this paper or this thing or whatever. And maybe you don't achieve your goal and you feel really discouraged. But if your habit is like, I'm writing 100 words every single day or Monday to Friday, then that's what you fall to. And then you keep doing it. And that by itself is already putting you in an amazing trajectory. So I think like spending more time thinking about building habits, it could be a much better bang for your turn and a safety net for you when you feel demotivated.
Thank you.
I'll invite any of the Zoomies to raise your hand if you want to ask questions about these last couple of topics, because we're also going to move on to these other. You have any more on your list of big things?
No, I think those two were the big things. I think there's like things that I learned in like each episode that I think are interesting, and I think there's only like one that maybe it's like an example that I can talk about. But for now, we can talk about something else.
The Alex, anything else come to mind? So one of the topic that might be on one of your future podcasts, but I think that several of our students asked about, where if you have any hidden curriculum type topics or thoughts on the difference between international students, graduate student experience versus domestic student, graduate student experience. Does anything come to mind on that like big topic?
Yeah, so I think our latest episode is about this actually. So Christine Strong, she's a professor at Old Dominion University, and we talked to her about like just understanding what are some differences between domestic, and I think the broad topics are one different for you. So for example, like what she was sharing is stuff like she wasn't used to this idea of happy hours and why they were important as a social kind of thing, and it's kind of weird and that kind of stuff. And understanding things about the importance of presentations and your presence and all of that and communication and whatever. So I think there are some aspects that are important. And I think one of the takeaways, at least one of my takeaways from that, and I'm also a partially international person as well, because I was born and raised in Lima, is that I think you as an international student, you have to be really curious, and I think that's one of the good things that you can do while you're in grad school. And at the same time, for the domestic students, you also have to be curious about the international student well. And I think that's the thing, because one thing that I saw a lot that I did not love is like the segmentation. And segmentation can be really good and important because you need your group and solid thing. But if that's the only thing that is happening, that's in yours. And to me, segmentation, it has a two-way problem, right? You need both parties to say, okay, let's hang out together. And so I don't think that's like a one has to fix it or the other.
Alex, does anything come to mind?
No, I mean, other than what Sebastian said, I would love to know if there's like certain aspects that you guys would want to hear covered. It's like one thing that's been on our minds that we don't have something we have like 20 episodes or something that are recorded that are not yet released, but it's not one of them, is like visas. And like it's something that keeps coming up at lunches when I talk with people. And so we want to do an episode just on like, what's it like? What stress is it? What do you have to do to make sure you get a visa? Is this actually something you should worry about? Well, there's like not necessarily like a checklist, but like just like how does this relate to the whole process or change
how do you navigate
decisions?
it?
But if there's other stuff you guys want covered that's even more specific, like you can send us an email or a chat. Like we'll try to do something on it beyond just like international versus domestic students, because there's just so many little topics in here.
Would anyone like to raise a specific topic about international versus domestic students, either for now or for a future podcast episode? Either on Zoom, if you'd like to raise your hand, we'll call on you. And if you're in the room, if you have an international domestic student question. Jill, please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I've been kind of poking through the ASA job bank, and they seem to be mostly US jobs, or it'll be like New York University, Shanghai or something, where there's some US connection. I'm not an international student, but like, are there places you would go if you're looking for jobs in Europe? Because obviously where I'm looking isn't it.
Oh,
So I'm not certain. You're in sociology from a quick Google. Is that the case? So in econ, we are lucky enough that I think it's the case, and Jason would know better than me, that we have one clearinghouse where those jobs show up. So I'm not really sure for sociology, like where you could go. I know we were just hiring a sociologist, and we put it on the American sociology, like what's the acronym? Whatever the acronym is for, like, it's like the AEA, but for sociologists, like the ASA or something. But again, that's the American. So I don't know for your particular subfield, what that is.
My intuition is go back maybe to the first thing, which is ask some of the universities in Europe that you may be interested in, hey, not if you guys have jobs, but like, where do you post your jobs and so on, and or either PhD students there or even junior scholars there, and that could give you some guidance about where to look. But again, like to a specific answer, I don't think I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't want to give you bad advice for sociology.
No,
There you go.
that's
Somebody
actually
knows it.
better because you like taught me how to fish instead of giving me a fish. So it's great. Thank you.
Mark?
Please, Mark.
Yeah, maybe I can say something about it because I'm now here, but my PhD is in Italy, and it works so differently from what I can see in the US. First, like we have this ECSR, which is the European Consortium for Sociological Research, in which they do job announcement, but it works more like whether the PI gets a grant and then they will publish it and then you will get it, more than through tenure tracks position from the uni, at least for postdocs. So it's a bit of a different system, but that's a good start. And most of the important ones will come up in that website for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go. Problem solved. That's good.
Any other international domestic type questions anyone would like to raise before we move on? Please, Shupa.
So it's specifically for the econ market.
Okay.
Because I am from. So I was on the market last year, and in Joe, like all jobs are posted there. And almost everyone writes, I won't name any job, but they would write that it's equal opportunity employer.
Mhm.
And then for two particular places, and applying takes time, right? You prepare your resume and everything, you change for every job. And just before applying, there was someone I knew, and I asked her that, looking at the job application, it's not sure that they hire domestic international students or not. And she said, no, we don't hire, but it's written nowhere in the job description. So how do you suggest that we deal with this situation? Because we spend so much time applying, and I even wasted one of my, Joe signaling. I could do it to two places. And one of them, I later heard that they do not hire internationals, but they don't write it anywhere in the application.
Were these academic institutions?
One was a think tank, and the other is an industry position. But in general, do you have a suggestion for internationals to understand, if nothing is written and it's all inside information, that you have to have someone in order to know if?
Yeah. My sense is that, and what I've been through this process is that academic institutions usually don't have any particular constraint about this. So it's only on the non-academic market. Obviously, government jobs are right, so that should be clear.
Yeah.
And then within the non-government, non-academic industry types of jobs, that I think it's much more unclear. Aside from asking, I'm not sure, Alex, if there's a great way to finding it out. Yeah.
Honestly, the only place I can speak with any type of confidence about is at IU, and just a couple searches I've been on, and that has not it has not come up as an issue on our end. So I'm sorry that you went through that, particularly with the signal issue. That's a big bummer. I guess this stinks as advice, but this is why I give this advice to lots of my students. Applying to lots of jobs in some sense mitigates that concern, although I appreciate it's costly and time intensive to apply to lots of jobs. So it's not a free piece of advice to fix the problem.
I mean, this might be a good thing for the AA to know if the employers can add this information, because that, by the way, that equal opportunity thing, it's only for U.S. citizens apply. It's not an equal opportunity. It's related to like race and gender among U.S. citizens and not necessarily equal opportunity across visa status, which they legally cannot offer that because they can say, no, we're only going to hire that. So, but that's to me, that's an information asymmetry problem, right? Like, let's just be clear about expectations.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you said like this is only for U.S. citizens, like race and gender across U.S. citizens, isn't it also accurate though that like you can't exclude somebody who's not a citizen on the base of their race? You can't exclude them because they're not a citizen. Like you can say we're not going to handle visa stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think you can say we're not going to hire you because you're this race, because you're this gender.
Yeah. Wait, I'm not sure what's the question.
Like, so you had said this is for among U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
So like, I thought you were implying that those rules don't apply if you're not a U.S.
Oh, I see. I think that's a legal question, right? I don't know the actual answer, but my sense is that when they're saying these kinds of stuff is about that, as opposed to discrimination based on visa status. That's a different issue. Yeah. So okay. Yeah, I don't know. That seems like a legal question. I don't know the answer to that.
Was there another question back in the back? Any other questions there or on Zoom? So a couple of maybe I'll just say a couple things that people brought up, and you can choose what comes to mind, Alex and Sebastian. Some brought up when they were guessing what the like high level points from the podcasts and were going to be. They said it could. They guessed work-life balance as one. They guessed essentially like much more about navigating advisee roles as one. So take that first. Does anything come to mind?
So navigating, advising, understand. What was the other one? Work-life
balance generally.
Oh yeah.
And then this complicated advise. But you could go from choosing advisor, but most of them were already like post-choice. How do you figure out how to navigate the relationship in terms of what one of our students asked about? Sometimes advisors have resources, but you don't know that they're there, and so how do you navigate? Pick whichever one you want to go with and start there.
Yeah, I think maybe in the work-life balance, this is more related to this issue of like everybody has worked in different ways, right? And so like I think to me this is a question of what is your personal definition of work-life balance, and how within your workflow you achieve that. And so I think many people handle it in many different ways. We recently had Sarah, who is also a grad from Wisconsin-Madison, and we asked her like how she's doing, because we always do that. And she gave a really cool answer, which is, I gave myself an A for being a mom, a B for service to my students, and a C for everything else. And so I think that's just an answer on, well, how are you prioritizing based on what you care about? And maybe there are times where you're going to prioritize family, maybe there are times you're going to prioritize something else. Prioritization doesn't have to be static, right? You can change what things you're going to prioritize on. And if that's your definition of work-life balance, then that's great, because it's about how you prioritize. But I mean, I think it definitely depends on that definition, which is harder. I don't know, Alex, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I've been pretty happy for the most part with I think people that we've had on haven't lied to us or like misrepresented at least how they do stuff. So like, for example, we have a lot of people that work a lot. And they talk about how they work a lot. We had someone come on, I was Donna Ginther, talk about she works every night, afterwards. And I think it's refreshing to hear this, because sometimes you hear people oh, you should do this, this, and this, and then you can be successful. But a lot of times people work a lot, and that's a choice that they make. And it's good to know that. I'm not saying that's a positive thing that we should all equally strive for, but I liked hearing that. Oh, this is how you get so much done. And then we've had other people that maybe they didn't say it in these exact words, but we had Ben Hansen come on. I mean, he talked about how he worked in industry for a year and what it was like transitioning from an industry job to an academia job. And he basically was I knew in the long run, I wanted the work-life balance of academia, because he talked about like how he will like go for a mountain bike ride at 8 a.m. and then like work later in the day. So like to have that temporal shift. But in order to achieve this, he basically worked 2 jobs the year that he was in industry, where he worked his job during the day and then he went home at night and tried to like publish papers. He said it was like, I don't know if he said it was terrible, but it sounded very stressful and it sounded kind of terrible. But like, I was pretty happy that he was like honest about this experience that he had. I don't know if that's like how to achieve work-life balance. I don't know how to do that, but I know there's like lots of different ways that people approach balancing work and life.
And then on this advisor question, you could take it a number of ways. Like, what would you like your advisees to know about you as an advisor and like that relationship? Or the other way, when you were an advisee, navigating this, are there thoughts that spring to mind? Or has anything come up on the podcast that was really about advisor-advisee relationships? So take however you want to start that conversation.
You want to take it first?
I can't think of an episode where we've explicitly covered this. So I think this is like a good idea, like conditional on having an advisor. Like, how do you make the most of it, so to speak? I don't think it's something we've explicitly discussed. In my own case, I had like just this Price Fishback at Arizona was my advisor. He's just a really nice person. I never doubted for a moment that he like genuinely cared about not just me, but like all other students in the program. So it made it a lot easier to just like speak with him like a person. So I didn't have this like extra feeling like I needed to be strategic in every interaction. So I never really developed a strong sense of like, how should you be strategic with your advisor's time or anything like that? Cause I just like, hey, Price. And like, he wanted us to call him Price. And like, like I got this question. And then like, he was just generous with his time and he'd be like, no, I don't have time right now. Talk to me tomorrow. Like if he didn't, so like, then you knew if he was talking with you, like he would give you time. So I don't think I have like great ideas of how to like make the most of it. I do remember being a student though, and not knowing, sounds like almost transactional, but like not knowing all the things that each individual potential advisor had to offer, so to speak. Like if you consider like each person in your respective department is like, they each have their own set of skills and papers and publications and like things that they could offer you. Like it wasn't like some open door to me. It wasn't like I was choosing from like a set of like complete and perfect information. So I don't know, maybe we could try to do an episode or something like how would you choose among potential advisors too? But I definitely kind of lucked into having a good one, more than like some active choice I made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think there's a lot of layers to this. Like there's some people who have choice and there's people who don't have choice. And that sucks. I would say, I think this goes back to this point about like networks and building relationships with people. So I think, I mean, it sounds so dumb and simple, but the advisor relationship, it's a human relationship, right? So like, it's not like it's 2 robots, it's like 2 humans. And in order for any human relationship to work well, expectations have to be kind of set. And it's a 2-way expectation. So your advisor is expecting something for you. And maybe as an advisee, you're expecting something from your advisor. And I think the more both parties can be clear about those expectations, the better. And what I mean by this is that if you don't know what your advisor expectations are for you, maybe ask, right? Like, hey, would you like me to email you every week? Would you like me to email you when something is done? Would you like me to, like, what is the level of communication that is most comfortable for you? And your advisor may be a kind of person who is like, we should be talking every week. Or they should be the person like, you know what, I just check in with me at the end of the semester. And there's different kinds of advisors. I think as an advisor, I try to set the expectations, right, really clear to my VCs about what I want. And I don't think that the way my expectations are something that everyone's going to want or like, right? So it's not like I'm going to match with every single person perfectly. And as an advisee, you also should have some expectations about your advisor and what kind of thing you want. So one thing that happens to a lot of the profession is that, I may have a particular advisor and that particular advisor works well into helping me about this particular professional aspect, but I'm not getting other things that I would want. And so as an advisee, I try to find the advice or the help I need through different people and not just through a single person. And they may be in your institution, or they may be in other institutions, or within your, again, network, or right, of like, maybe it's your peer, maybe somebody a little bit older, maybe somebody from a different institution. So like, I think as advisees, you kind of have to look for what you want and set that expectation with a particular person. And maybe that's going to be your advisor, maybe it's going to be a plethora of people. But that's the only thing that you can have in your control, because sometimes it feels like there's very little in your control. I think it's easier to maybe talk about the things that I've seen that haven't worked really well. Like, for example, like, sometimes advisors feel like students are disappearing on them, like they don't hear anything from them, and because they don't know what's happening to them. And so that to me is an example of like, that advisor had an expectation that student was going to constantly be checking in with this. And maybe that student thought like, well, I don't want to send in an email because I don't want to annoy this person, right? Because I don't have anything to show. And so like, that's a bad equilibrium, right? Because it's like, there's two different expectations that are not meeting. And so that's an example of like that things need to be talked about so that both parties don't know what's going on.
And this was one of those topics that several students wrote in about. Is there anyone who'd like to push on specific questions that came up about advisory relationships? In the here, Shiro, please.
So I don't want to happen to this me, but when my advisor take some sabbatical, when they move to another institution, how we can keep the relationship between the advisors and advisees? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think again it goes back to, well, what relationship do you want from your advisor? And because some people will be like, oh, good that you're leaving. Like, I don't want to, but let's say you want to continue it, then I think you express what you want and you let the other person decide if they want to continue with that. So maybe you say like, hey, I would love to continue this relationship. I wonder if we can do check-ins every X, Y, and Z. So you're explicit about what you want, and the other person may be like, that's great. Or, you know what, in a new place, I'm going to have a lot of responsibilities. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this, and so on. Or maybe say like, yeah, let's do it. Actually, let's do it even every week or whatever. So I think just, again, being explicit about what your wants and seeing and letting, obviously writing whatever email or form of communication where you are, like, you're not like demanding, right? It's more about like, this is something I would like. If you're interested, great. If you're not, that kind of deal.
Yeah. And I think it's totally fair to ask your advisor if they're going on sabbatical or something, like, hey, I'm like kind of worried about going on the market. What advice do you have? Like, should I like email you? Should we set up Zoom calls? Am I not supposed to talk to you for this semester?
Right.
Like, I think you should like try to set up that clear line of communication. There was somebody that I wanted to talk to, but I was like kind of too afraid as like a third year PhD student to just like be honest and like go up to them. And then they went on sabbatical for a year during my fourth year. And boy, did I regret it. Like I was able to talk with them luckily, like at the start of my fifth year a lot, but like, I was like, oh, the whole fourth year, I was like, I wish I would have like set up lines of communication with this person beforehand. And then for some reason, I just like didn't think it was okay to email them. And it would have been totally fine to have done that now, like looking back at it. But I messed up there by not doing that.
A funny anecdote of this. So I was working, so my advisor is Skid Carpenter. I did my PhD at Vanderbilt. And I had taken a class with him and I was working on a paper with him. And I still didn't know if he was my advisor, right? Because it's not like I like put down on my one knee and be like, hey, would you like to be my advisor, right? And because that's how I felt it had to be. And so I was like, I just like work up the courage to, in a meeting, at the end of the meeting, be like, hey, I think we have to fill out this form. And I think it's about being like, I was like so nervous. Would you be interested in filling out this form? I don't know, bye, thank you. And he was like, yeah. And fill it out. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. So like, I acknowledge that there's this weird thing, but then now that I'm on the other side, it's like, oh yeah, that is a human person and you can just ask them questions and like, it's okay, So obviously there's some people who are super intimidating. So like, granted, there's exceptions to the rule, but in any case, yeah. Like I definitely felt nervous having those awkward conversations, but once you have them, they're like, oh yeah, this is fine. So.
Other advisor-related questions? Same topic, back to Zoom also. Raise your hand, anyone, if you'd like to raise an advisor-type question.
I guess I have sort of a follow-up to that. It's not well formed, but so I'm thinking about like a lot of our faculty will say that like they kind of think of us as colleagues, and they're especially trying to craft us into being colleagues, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess how did you navigate that transition from being like an awkward student to like feeling like collegial with people?
Yeah. Alex, you want to start on that one?
I feel like it's gonna be like, man, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because it speaks volumes about like the people that are advising you right now. So that's great. So I think it's going to be probably easier for you than if that wasn't the case. Like I've heard of students at other institutions that like feel constantly belittled and like they're not like that vibe isn't there. I was lucky enough to be at a similar place where like I was treated with respect in almost every interaction. And I still found it kind of tough. Like I definitely don't have a problem asking what might be dumb questions in seminars or anything. Like I'll like ask if I don't understand something. But I feel now more comfortable doing that as I've just like gone to lunch with people and like talked to them and gotten to know them as people gradually. And I don't think like anything other than a little bit of time and repeated interactions would have like made that seem a little bit easier. I think if I wasn't coming from a place that sounds kind of like what they're trying to build for you at Wisconsin, like treating you like colleagues, that might have taken even longer because there might have been like some like deep ingrained sense of like inferiority or something, or like difference between classes sounds weird, but like, you know, like levels of hierarchy in academia. So I don't know how to overcome that, but like you are a colleague and you can do it. So just like know that as you're going forward.
Yeah, I think that's great that there is at least that mentality. And I definitely did not have that while I was in grad school. I think unfortunately or fortunately, it's a function of time. You kind of like, again, it's a human relationship. So sometimes you talk to people and it takes a while for you to warm up with that human being. And sometimes it's like you click, right? And so like, it is a function of time, and you don't have to rush it, nor you have to take it slow either. I think the more you can, try to feel comfortable. So like, I'll speak to my experience. So like with Kit, it took me a while to feel like a colleague, like even post being a professor. And that's because he doesn't do like a lot of small talk. And so that was kind of hard, but the way I established a little more of that relationship is like, he would say like, okay, why don't we do this analysis this way? And let's say I had a disagreement with that. And I was like, so I would be like, I was just trying to be honest. Like, so I think if we do this way, I think people are going to think X, Y, and Z. However, if we do it this other way, like, it seems like it could address all of these issues, and so on. And so like, that was a way of me saying like, I don't think we should do it that way. I think we should do it this way for this particular reasons. But I wasn't like, you know what, this is better, right? I just like gave reasons and that. And so that made me, and he accepted, he's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And so that made me gain confidence, of course, because a lot of it's about confidence, right? And comfortability, but those have to be functions of time. And like, in the same way, if somebody asked me like, how do you become really good friends with someone? I'm like, I don't know. Like, you just spend time with them, right? And then share who you are, and that's it. And that's kind of like, unfortunately, that answer.
Other advisor, please.
Yeah.
And you're in the very back, so
Yeah.
please shout.
Yeah, so I was wondering, like, what would you say, like, when if an advisor did not like work out, but like, what point would you like considering changing? So I'm from Europe, so there you can like change. It's not like an issue, but of course you have to go like through a process and everything. So
Are you getting this, Alex, about changing advisors and advisors that don't work out? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, how do you break up with someone?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I've seen it happen. I had to break up with some co-authors too, so I don't have like the experience of the advisor, of course. I mean, first of all, I acknowledge that it's hard and it's awkward and blah blah blah. I think when I've had conversation with students about this, my first question has always been, what is the thing that is not working, right? And sometimes you can fix someone's relationship because it's all about communication. Like, it was a very clear example is this student who was like, I'm not talking to this person because I feel like if I do this, they're gonna think X, Y, and Z. So I went and talked to the person. And it's like, this is how that person is feeling. And they're like, no, like that's not what. And so they just like literally needed to talk. So I think like one first question is like, well, why do you think it's not working? Let's say there's reasons why it's not working that you definitely wanted to change. I think again, this is a question where maybe you ask your peers if they know about his personality or whatever, and see what things you can say. I mean, it's kind of hard, but I think to me, this you're a grad student, you need an advisor, right? So before breaking a relationship, you may need to start another one. And I think that's the safest transition, which is like, okay, you build another advisor relationship, and then you maybe slowly transition out of the other one, or that other person will tell you how to do it, or maybe the other person will do it for you, right? Because they're peers as well. So I think it's like, you'll break up with someone, but you don't want to be single for too long, especially if you're in the older part of your career. And pardon for me for that terrible analogy. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely ask other faculty in a politically correct way, if possible, in your respective department, the same question. So like I had a friend, like I was luckily in my grad school experience, but I had a friend, this isn't being posted externally, right? I know it's being recorded, but it's not like it'll be on the internet for forever. Okay.
You're getting the true hidden career.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to like disparage this faculty member for no reason, but I had a friend whose advisor was not very good. Literally would never reply to his email, like ever. And then we heard him on This American Life, they didn't even say his name, where he was playing a board game tournament. And we emailed the guy. We were like, what's going on? Like, you're not responding to these emails. And then he finally was like, oh, that's funny. You heard me, and responded to all these emails. Like, that guy should have changed advisors for sure. Like, it was not a good relationship. This person didn't care about him. And he continued on with this advisor for a long time. And I think it like hurt. Like, he's not an academic now. Right. And I wish he would have changed. And that was maybe one of the few like very bad advisor matches that I'm aware of. And I think if my friend would have just talked with other faculty about what was going on, rather than just talking with other grad students, they would have been like, no, that's inappropriate. Like, we should try to match you up with somebody else. But maybe in some places that's not the case, right? And I think that's like I hope at Wisconsin, like where you guys are at, that is the case. Like, if something's going on, you can feel free to discuss it with other people. But like, to just try to think about it and be like, why isn't this working? And in this case with my one friend, it was like, because the advisor was never responding. But maybe it's because like you didn't do anything, or maybe you're not responding, or maybe like I don't know, like just try to figure out what's going on and then what potential ways can fix it, and then talk to some people about it to try to come up with an action plan.
So next thing, whether there is a topic we haven't hit that comes back to mind, like back up at 10,000 foot, you know what you've covered. Is there something that seems missing to either of you in our last 5 to 10 minutes? And I have one holdout topic if nothing comes to mind.
No, there's like only little things that come to mind. Nothing big topic wise, I would say. I feel like we have learned a lot, but there's so much we still need to learn. And we love suggestions about what to do and cover. And as we said, we have a list of things to come out. And I think, maybe this is part of your answer. I think I've definitely learned that like for any given issue, I want to get at least 2 or 3 perspectives. And if they all match, that's a great set of information. If they're all different, then you're like, okay, what do I do? I think the people have different perspective on a particular issue. And the more perspectives you have, the better that you can move forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with that broadly. And just like something that I just like to bring up with, like, I like reading books and stuff on like, how do you do this? How do you organize this thing? How do you like the Deep Work book by Cal Newport? I love that book. But a lot of this is like at risk of extreme survivorship bias, right? Where like maybe like some piece of advice like doesn't actually matter for success one way or another, and it's like luck matters. So I just wanted to be like cognizant of that the entire time. Like, we're trying to have a good faith conversation with you guys, but like we're just like 3 people that like also went through this process. Maybe we don't know what we're talking about on some things as much as we're trying to give like good faith advice. So I think, man, who said this, Sebastian, on our podcast? Like, I think it might have been Trevon actually, where he was like, I give
Trevon, yeah,
like it's free disposal. Like you can do with this as you are. Yeah, just like, so hear this, it's more information for you to use, and then like use it to like update your decision making process like one way or another. But don't view it as like gospel or something, like whether it comes from us or other people.
Oh, I've got one other topic that we'll close on, but anything that you'd like to raise here in the room or on Zoom that we haven't covered? So the other topic, I wonder. Oh, sorry, Jill, please unmute and ask.
Thanks. So for publishing, if you get an R&R and you have a reviewer who, like, they give lots of different types of suggestions, but are there types of pushback that are not wise to make? And are there types of pushback where it's like pretty solid that, or accepted that if you say, no, I'm not going to do that, here's why, you know, that category of reason is pretty accepted?
I mean, I think, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, I'll go first and then, so these are things that I think I learned from Catherine McLean's episode. She's a editor at JPEN, which is journal. So I think broadly, what are the main things, right? Like whatever the editor says is the thing like that's super important. So let's say this is something that the editor has not highlighted, but the referee has highlighted. I think, you know, if it's something easy to do and you can do it, you can go ahead and do it. If it's something that you think it's like, you can do it, but it's wrong, you can do it and tell what is wrong. So I had an experience where they wanted me to use a completely new methodology for this particular paper. And I was like, I don't think we were gaining anything from that methodology. But it was very easy for me to say like, here, I'll do a little bit of that methodology and I'll tell you why that's, I don't think, okay. And to me, my labor was to convince the editor of my reasoning. So I think that's one way to go. If it's something that like you cannot do, it's too complicated, and you shouldn't do for whatever reasons, and again, like spelling out the reasons for that. I always, though, not always, but I send my referee reports and my responses to people in my network for them to read and see if they think that I approach to things. And there's a lot of times they're like, you know what, you're not answering this particular concern, or like you answered that concern in a different point, you should just copy and paste this point here. So I think part of the answer is not just relying on your own perspective, but relying on other people's perspectives as well. Alex.
Yeah, I just typed out sort of what, I'll just say it again just so I didn't lose my thought. I try as a rule, and Jason has a lot more experience, and so does like Catherine has like 66 publications or something crazy. Like, so she's a good person to get advice from on this. I try to just do everything the reviewers say if it's possible to do. Like if it's like, even if it's like, I don't think this like regression is going to work, that doesn't mean it's going to be in the paper. So often my responses to reviewers will be like 80 pages and like really long. And a lot of it is copy and pasted text, like over and over again from the paper. Like it might be the same text in different places.
Yeah. Read this line. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible for them to see that I, in good faith, am trying to do everything that they say. And then I'll try to argue out like, well, I did the thing that you suggested. Here it is. But here's maybe why it's not such a great idea. And often in writing that, I realize, they actually is a good idea. Like a couple months later, like there's some version of this that I misinterpreted and like wasn't objective about for my own work. And I see the comment about like theoretic disagreements and stuff. This isn't true for everything, right? But like, I'm just saying more often than not, when I'm like, what an idiot comment from this reviewer. And then like 6 months later or something, or a couple months later, when I'm like talking with a colleague, I'll be like, nah, I think they were right. Like, that's like a problem with my thing. You know?
Well, so. that and also, I mean, maybe this goes to the theoretical. I had reactions to referee reporters where I'm like, they did not read the paper. We talked about this. This is so upsetting. Yeah. 6 months later, I read my own paper. I'm like, oh yeah, no, totally. I did not explain it right. Like
I misexplained it.
So like, we're so much passionate in it. So like, I mean, time helps. I think I don't know who put that comment of theoretical conceptual, but you know, sometimes there's much more specific things that are that the advice needs a lot more context. So it's kind of harder to do those. What is a conceptual disagreement and so on. So that, I don't know, that's a little bit harder.
I do co-author with people. I think what was this Jill that asked this question, that are more comfortable just saying no to people, by the way. And I just think it's like, I don't know. I'm like, I may be like too willing to appease people. And I have co-authors who are very successful where they will say like, no, I don't think it's a good idea for these reasons. And they will not do a thing. And they have tons of publications. So like the way that I suggested doing it is by no means the only way to do it, just the way that I'm the most comfortable with. because I think it like minimizes the chance of a rejection, but maybe like that's not the thing we should be. Maybe shouldn't be our objective function, right? Maybe like you think something is true and you should just like go to bat for it. And like, who cares if it gets rejected or not?
Yeah. And another way that I've seen it cheaply is like you essentially be like, hey, this particular point, I'm confused about what you mean in one, which is not great, but like it's this way of being like, I'm happy to do something specific. Like you respond in a way of like, what is the specific thing that you want me to change about this? Because sometimes with this more conceptual things are much broader, but like, you know, if a referee is never going to like your paper, no matter what version it is, that's a very different situation that you're in. And no matter what analysis or whatever you take, they're just not going to accept it, right? So that is a different, I think, problem in that way.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I don't mean to like harp on this exact thing, but like there's a lot of different ways to do this. So like we've had things before where like it was clear we had an antagonistic referee, and the editor basically saved us and was like, hey, like, you know, make sure you answer these things from referee 2, but like you don't really need to focus on referee 1, was written in between the lines by saying focus on this thing. But in there, the way we responded to it was like, hey, we did this thing, and if that didn't quite address your concerns, do let me know and I will like expand on it later.
Here's my cell phone number, text me.
Yeah, like banking on the fact that like I think the editor didn't think that was an important thing, and the editor is my true audience here.
Yeah, exactly. The editor is your true audience. That's right.
So in a couple minutes, one thing that has come up, and then we'll wrap up. And thanks again for your time, thank you, Alex and Sebastian. Is COVID. So COVID comes up a lot, and especially for graduate students, you know, entering the market. You know, who knows when we'll be over it, but you know, in the next year, the next 2 years, this is really shaping a lot of the experiences. What is your top level advice or thoughts that you give to graduate students who are asking you these types of questions?
Do you mean like how to navigate like being on the market when you had 2 years where you were like in this weird COVID zone, or like just like in general, how it affected like everything?
So Alex, you're still on Zoom. Part of this is coming from your question. Did you want to unmute and shape this further?
Sure. I think the drive from this question that I submitted was mainly that there's a whole lot of informal talk and worry about like the short and long-term implications of COVID for the academic job market writ large, not specifically to economics or to sociology. It's just kind of this general malaise about how everything is in the dumpster. Are the conversations I'm getting, and I'm curious if there's any insider information besides like the anxiety from graduate students about how COVID has kind of fundamentally changed what job prospects will look like long into the future. I don't know if things have recovered quickly and job opportunities are opening back up, and it was this weird 2 years of uncertainty, or if there truly have been some like restructuring of academic institutions in such a way that we need to consider our job prospects. So thanks for your answer.
I think I have some good news from that front, but again, I know you said like not economics specifically, but like John Cawley, I'll try to find the tweet and I'll put it in here in a second. And the AEA keep track of like number of jobs posted on the Joe, which is like a nice central clearinghouse for like job openings for economists. Yeah, it looked great this year. And we're hiring this year in health policy, and we have tons of awesome applicants, and there are tons of positions this year. So I don't really know, and I won't pretend to know what's going to happen in the long run, but it does seem like if we're using this particular year as a litmus test, just in econ, stuff looks pretty healthy. Our particular institution did fairly well during COVID, all things considered. I do think there's probably some concern for like very small, financially unstable institutions, maybe like lots of tiny teaching institutions, but like large state, like Wisconsin's going to be fine, I think, like no matter what happens. So kind of depends on what kind of job you're interested in. Like the Vassars of the world are going to be fine, but like the liberal arts college that maybe you've never heard of in like Missouri, like might not be around in a couple of years. I don't know. But I do think there's a lot of jobs this particular year for econ, and I'm not it has not been my read that we're undergoing like some huge structural transition. It was just a big shock. If it makes you feel a little bit better, I was going to grad school during the financial crisis, and like a lot more people went to grad school. Then like there were a lot more people on the market my year. So like it sucked because of that, but like I don't think it like changed anything other than like the probability of getting into any individual grad school or getting into any individual job.
Yeah,
That's helpful. Thank you.
I don't have any particular set information. To be honest, from the grapevine, a lot of what I'm hearing is that a lot of universities are doing better than what I thought they were financially, and the people who have money have not lost it. So like, and there's the ones who are giving grants and stuff like that. So I'm not, I guess, particularly too worried. But even let's say it was a shitty situation, I try to advise my students that you can worry about things you can't control and not worry about things you cannot control. And so like, if there's something specific about the market this year, I don't know, that more advanced juniors are going on the market, and so maybe it becomes more competitive. There's nothing you can do about that. Like, you can't go to advanced junior and be like, don't go on the market, you know, like, so like I mean, part of it is like, does that information going to just create more anxiety for you, or is it going to do something that you can like change something about it? And I think most of the attempts is like, it just creates longer anxiety. So focus on what you can control, erase the noise, and kind of try to get a job.
So we're going to wrap it up there. And first, thanks so much to both Alex and Sebastian. Let's give them some love here.
Thank you.
And Alex, just thanks so much for doing this. And
Yeah,
maybe
thank you, everybody.
some of this content might make it into your podcast at some point.
Yeah,
Some of the ideas.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys. Thanks everyone.
Okay,
Yeah,
bye,
thanks.
Alex.
Good to see you, Jason. Good to see you, Sebastian. Bye.
See ya.